All right, welcome back once again, everybody. It's the Dr. Treefruit and Don podcast. I'm Don Seifert. It is Tuesday, May 13th, and I am here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi.
Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And who we will be starting with today, Dr. Sean Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
And I will let you get right to it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Don. Uh, Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the phenology of where we are and then move towards some options or suggestions. And again, I'm going to be focusing on thinning like last week. In Adams County and surrounding areas, for the most part, we are at 20 millimeters, anywhere from 18 to 20 millimeters in size of fruitlets. And so this week, it looks like it's getting cold Tuesday, today, and tomorrow. And again, we're getting some warm weather in the high 70s on Thursday, Friday. We also seem to have some good weather on Saturday and Sunday. But in any case, this Thursday to Sunday weekend is probably your last chance to chemically thin fruitlets. And because once they get past 25 millimeters, they tend to be minimal, they tend to have a minimal or no response to thinners. And so I'll just start with talking about our late season thinners, and then we will slowly move to other parts of the state. And so in Southeast PA, like I mentioned, on average, their fruitlets are anywhere from 18 to 22 millimeters. Could be smaller if at the northern edges of Adams County, they're usually a few days behind. But in any case, this weekend is going to be very important, or this end of this week, Thursday to Sunday window, is going to be very important for thinning. Probably your last chance. And so rescue thinning options, I'm going to focus on ethereal, particularly since a lot of your fruitlets are going to be above 20 millimeters when you get to the thinning actually towards the end of the week. And so ethereal is a rescue thinner that can thin fruit up to 25 millimeter size, after which they generally tend to become ineffective. And then, so ethereal is a product that works when you apply temperatures between 70 and 80 Fahrenheit. Anything above 80, you want to be a little bit careful. Anything above 85, you generally want to be super careful with ethereal because it can remove all fruitlets and cause excessive thinning. And so for increasing the efficacy of ethereal, you could use a surfactant, non-ionic surfactant, right, like Regulate or Li 700 at the rate of about 2 pints per 100 gallons. You could also mix it with a pint of 7 or Carbo, which is very useful for uh, thinning clusters down to 2 or 1 from 3 or 4. And so it is especially, 7 is especially good with helping to sort of remove fruitlets, especially when they're in a cluster. And so ethereal could be combined with 7 and Regulate, like I mentioned, a pint of 7 and 2 pints of Regulate per 100 gallons of water volume. And then, so based on work done by Wes Oshio and Win Cogill for a bunch of years working with ethereal in different varieties, we have some suggested rates of use for different varieties. I'll start with the lowest rate and then can go up. And so at the lowest rate, we have varieties like Golden Delicious, Rome Beauty, and August, not very hard to thin. And so you want to go in with about a 0.4 pint for 100 gallons of spray volume. All of what I'm talking about is for 100 gallons of spray volume. And so it could be a, zero point 0.4 or a quarter pint, 2.4 pints for Golden Delicious, Rome Beauty, and August. Now, following that, you could, for Enterprise, you could go a little bit higher to about half a pint. And then for Jana Gold, it could go anywhere from half to 0.75 or three-fourths of a pint. Similarly, Gala, Cameo, Gold Rush, you could use anywhere from 0.75 pints to about 1 pint. So three-fourths of a pint to 1 pint, depending on the if depending on the crop load that you have. And for hard to thin varieties, like for spurt type delicious, Fuji, and things like that, you could go up to 1.5 pints for thinning. And definitely mix it with surfactant and 7, especially if you've had no thinning results from your previous thinners that you applied last week, and you really need to go in with a heavy dose. Then you want to think about combining it with 7 and something and a surfactant. So those are just the different rates or suggestions of for rates for a use of ethro. But again, if your fruits are not bigger than 20 millimeters or 22 millimeters, then you have other options as well in the 15 to 20 millimeter size range for rescue thinning. And you could use a high rate of NAA plus 7. And then similarly, you can use Maxell plus 7, but also add oil to the mix when you're thinning at this later stage. And the new product is Seed is also a good 15 to 20 millimeter thinner for apples. However, a seed is might not be enough on its own to sort of have a significant effect on removing fruitlets. So I would highly suggest to combine it or tank mix it with Maxell, especially for small fruited cultivars. If you weren't able to use Maxell last week because of the low temperatures, then this week is a good week to use something like a seed plus Maxell, plus a non-ionic surfactant like Li 700 or Regulate for effective thinning at the 15 to 20 millimeter stage. Now, a seed is labeled to be used as a thinner for in the rate of 200 to 400 parts per million. And so that is anywhere from about 7.5 to about 12.5 to 13 ounces. And so you could vary the rate of a seed depending on how much thinning you want. I would highly suggest to go with the 350, 400 ppm, so the higher rates, 12, 13 ounces, and mix that with a regular rate of Maxell that you would use. So around 3 to 4 ounces. This I'm talking about per 100-gallon water volume, and then mix it again with something 2 pints of something like Regulate or Li 700. Now, the other thing that I did want to mention is a lot of growers are technically tend to spray a lot more on the top versus the bottom of the tree, and they have their nozzle settings as such, especially for thinners, because you have over thinning in the bottom half of the tree versus not enough thinning at the top half of the tree. And so generally when applying thinners, we are used to setting the application such that you're getting a little bit more at the top versus the bottom. And so generally when we start with bloom or blossoms, usually we start with about 2/3 of that spray to the top and then 1/3 to the bottom. And as we move to our 8 to 12 millimeter sprays, the suggested rate is 80% going to the top and about 20% to the bottom. And by the time fruitlets reach 18 millimeters, which is where Adams County is at currently, at least, it is highly suggested to direct 100%. So all of your spray to the top. Usually we get enough runoff that it is able to reach the bottom as well. And so what we, based on multiple years of testing that they've done at Cornell, they highly recommend to use 100% of the spray that is directed to the top, especially when you get to the rescue thinning stage, and so that they usually tend to trickle down anyways. And the other thing is that most of the times you have under thinning that happens in the top. So the idea is to focus more on the top and try to get it somewhat more equalized. Now, in other parts of the state, we are anywhere from uh, 8.5 at Center County to Berks. We are at 10 to 14 millimeters, so anywhere around that size. And so we still have options this week. For many of our sites, this week will be our regular 8 to 12 millimeter thinning applications on Thursday or Friday. And then we still have next week as an option for thinning based on the weather conditions. And so we could go in with a regular thinning. We have some good temperatures, I think 76, 77 One day we're close to the 80s, so we have some good temperatures on Thursday and Friday. It's maybe Saturday as well. And so Maxell is an option that we could use this week. And especially for small fruit varieties like Gala, Maxell plus 7, and can be mixed with oil if you want a strong response, or NAA can continue to be an option to be used uh, uh, for for thinning. And think that's it with me for thinning. The one thing that we have noticed with the peach thinners that we applied this year, this was about 2, 3 weeks ago when the peaches were at bloom, is that because of the cool weather that we've been experiencing so far, we have still not yet seen the full effects of using a seed for peaches, wherein we are seeing fruit that are small, but they're still not fallen off, where by this time usually they would. For example, in last year we would expect to see that a lot of them would have fallen by now. It's just that with the cool periods of weather that we've had, we might not see the full effects of the seed use in peaches not until a week or two more towards the end of May, where we will get a clearer picture of how much thinning a seed has done for the peaches. So I would just say for people thinking about whether a seed worked on thinning your peaches or not, just hold fast for a few more a week or two to then observe how much thinning you've got from the peaches, and then to decide how much you want to take off by hand thinning. Because I do expect, based on some of the work that we're doing, and you'll notice that some of the sizes of the peaches are drastically different in each branch, and most of those very tiny peaches are going to fall off in the next few weeks. It's just because of the cool weather they haven't fallen off already. And in general, if you're worried about, okay, how do I know if my thinner worked, as well as much as, because it takes, if you've sprayed something last week, because of the cool weather, you might not see its effects. You might not see fruitlets fall off immediately, uh, but actually those fruitlets might fall off in the future. So the rule of thumb is when you have a cluster, and in that cluster you have the biggest fruitlet, which is more than, if it is more than 50% the size of the other fruitlets. Or if the other fruitlets are less than 50% of the size of that main fruitlet, it doesn't have to be the king. It just has to be the biggest fruitlet in that cluster. Then that means that the other fruitlets are eventually going to drop, most likely than not. And so that is kind of the rule of the thumb when you go out to the orchards and kind of check for whether your fruitlets are going to drop or not. If you do see a drastic difference in size between your fruitlets in the cluster, then most likely they are going to drop. And I think that's it for me. Uh, Let me know if you have any questions, Don, or anyone else.
No, sounds great, Sean. I appreciate you giving that update. And yeah,
Thanks.
Gary?
Okay, so as I'm listening to the rain coming against the window, there's a bunch of things that we need to be thinking about, of course, disease-wise, because rain, wetness, warm weather, these are all conducive conditions. So let's start with stone fruit first. We are in the zone for controlling for bacterial spot of peach, and nectarines, and then also apricots and plums. Apricots and plums are a little more challenging because there are fewer products registered for apricots and plums to control for bacterial spot. But first, the you to control for bacterial spot, you need to use a rotational program of multiple different products. And so those multiple products include basically the antibiotic oxytetracycline, which comes as MycoShield or Fireline. This does have its limits because you really only get a very narrow window of time for control because it degrades easily by UV light, but it still is effective for controlling for a bacterial spot. You have copper, which is a big tool for growers, and but you are using it at a very, very low rate of copper. And the rate that we aim for is the metallic copper content. So zero point 0.5 ounces of metallic copper up to 1 ounce of metallic copper. And then finally, you've got your alternative products like Serenade and Double Nickel or Regalia to sort of rotate into your regime. I'm aware that there are other products that people are using, but some of these products are just labeled as foliar fertilizers. They aren't pesticides. So I am aware that some people are rotating these and they find success, but just as a disclaimer, as far as it's difficult to advocate for some of these products because they don't have a pesticide label. They are just labeled as fertilizers. So that is just, if you don't hear me mention a certain product, that this is where I'm coming from. So as far as the timing with bacterial spot, so this shuck split is the time you want to start, and you want to be, or even a little bit earlier, depending on how susceptible your variety is. So petal fall shuck split, we are definitely past that period, and you want to be applying your protection on a 7 to 14 day interval through the summer. I usually tell folks to do it to about 3 weeks until harvest, and then you really want to throw all your energy to controlling for brown rot during that time. You need to do shorter applications when there's really rainy periods, and especially when they're frequent and the temperatures are ranging from 75 to 85. These are perfect conditions. We are on the little bit of the cooler side today, particularly in south central Pennsylvania, but it will be warming up over the next few days, and there is moisture, I guess, forecasted moisture in the that could be happening. So we might be on the cusp of some really good bacterial spot conditions. When it is really hot and dry, especially dry, you can stretch your intervals. The bacterial spot needs moisture. It needs that humidity and that wetness to thrive. When it's dry, it's not going to be happy. So who knows what the season will bring, but right now we've had some pretty moist conditions over the last 2 weeks. So as far as the copper, using copper. So a few things. One, when you're looking at the specific rate to use, you want to be looking at what the metallic copper content is. So for instance, Koside, I always use Koside as my example because it's an easy one. It's 30% copper, which means that there's zero point 0.3 pounds of copper per pound of product. And so when you crunch the numbers to figure out your zero point 0.5 ounce per acre rate of metallic copper, that comes out to about 1.7 ounces of Koside per acre that you want to use. That translates to the 0.5 ounce of metallic copper. You can double that up to 1 ounce of metallic copper, which would be 3.4 ounces of Koside, and that would give you a little more control, but it can cause a little more damage. So I think that's a good segue to talk about understanding the do's and don'ts of copper because it's a natural biocide. It is going to kill bacteria, it's going to kill fungi, and it's going to kill plant cells. There's no such thing as a safe copper. No matter what the sales pitches tell you, I've tested safe coppers. They all do some level of damage. In other words, they cause holes in leaves. Peach trees can take a little bit of damage. It's okay. It just tells you the copper is working. But there's not a copper out there that will not cause some holes in peach leaves because it is a natural biocide. So, some things to keep in mind when using copper, especially as I'm hearing the rain pounding against the windows. So, one thing is that you do not want to be applying copper during slow drying conditions. So, I probably would advise to not use copper this week because there may be slow drying conditions. The reason why slow drying conditions are a don't when copper usage is that you're using fixed coppers with the copper ions that are bound to the particles. So every time those copper particles are wetted, they release copper ions. And so the more wet those particles become and more frequent, the more ions are going to release. And it's those ions that are doing your controlling. It's killing the bacteria, it's killing the fungi, it's also killing plant cells too. Uh, you want to be mindful of slow drying conditions. You want to make sure that you're not tank mixing any coppers with products that are acidic. So please do not tank mix with adjuvants. I'm not a fan of tank mixing coppers with adjuvants, but please don't tank mix with adjuvants that will be acidifiers. And so because the more acidic the solution, the more that copper is going to be releasing its ions from those particles and may having a lot of ions available to do what you need to do for controlling disease. It's always good to make sure that your spray solution is at least 6.0 or higher because, again, it is the acidity that makes the copper, unfortunately, more phytotoxic. Um, it's a good idea to use copper in an alternating fashion as far as alternating it with different products because that way you're going to lessen the phytotoxicity. You can tank mix copper with lime because is a bactericide unto itself, but lime will also help temper the copper and even slowly, as far as slow the release of those copper ions for the particles. So you can tank mix copper and lime perfectly fine. That was the Bordeaux, or that is the Bordeaux mixture that's been commonly used to control diseases on grapes. I mean, just looking at my list here. So, as far as also another reminder of what not to mix coppers with is don't mix coppers with foliar fertilizers because foliar fertilizers are designed to be absorbed into the plant tissue. And if you've got copper mix that copper is going to be pulled in as well. So you don't want to make that copper work any better than it already is going to. I've seen issues with people where they've had wrong tank mixtures and their peach trees look like Christmas trees. No leaves or very few leaves and nothing but fruit. So just as a reminder that when you're using copper, it is a great tool for mitigating bacterial spot. You will get a little bit of leaf spotting or leaf holes. You'll mostly see that on the oldest leaves because of the buildup of the repeated usage of copper, but that's okay. It just tells you that the copper is working. And also, some people, when they see this damage, these holes in the leaves, they think it's bacterial spot when it's actually copper phytotoxicity. So they may be wanting to control the disease even more. So I always tell people, look at the shape of the holes on the leaf. If the holes are round and scattered around, and that leaf looks like a slice of Swiss cheese, that is copper injury. So I would say the O in copper, the round hole, the O in round for round hole. For bacterial spot, the lesions are angular. They follow the veins of the leaf. So oftentimes you'll see them, they'll be very characteristic on the veins as far as they may be water soaked or they could be light green that turns to brown. The hole may fall out. You'll see it at the tips of the leaves. Those lesions are always angular. So I say the A in angular and the A in bacteria as far as a mnemonic to remember. So again, depending on how the season is going, a rotation program is the utmost importance. And if conditions are favorable for disease, you want to keep those, you definitely want to keep the intervals very, very tight. When it's dry, you can stretch. It's not a problem. So as far as moving on to brown rot, so now you don't have to be super, uh, you have to be vigilant, but you don't have to be bringing out the big guns for brown rot right now. Captan and sulfur will do the job with regards to keeping the brown rot spore population down. Rusty spot, we're probably at the end, towards the end, getting towards the end of rusty spot control. However, it's been so wet. This isn't rusty spot weather, but we are controlling for rusty spot petal fall, shuck split, first cover and second cover. So probably to the beginning of June is when you can pull back on rusty spot control. And the last thing as far as stone fruit goes is cherry leaf spot. We are in cherry leaf spot weather. You remember cherry leaf spot is like the apple scab of cherries. The leaves, the spores overwinter in the leaves. So you want to be making sure that you're keeping your sour cherry trees covered with fungicides right now, especially with the ideal weather conditions. Why? Because it doesn't affect the fruit. So why should I care about cherry leaf spot? Well, cherry leaf spot is aggressive on the leaves and you can get premature defoliation. So we want to be aggressive in keeping the tree as healthy as possible, especially while the fruit are growing on the tree. And then also after harvest. And so sour cherries are typically harvested towards the end of June, beginning of July. So we want cherry leaf spot to be controlled through probably the middle to the latter half of July to keep those leaves on for as long as possible. That is the goal. We don't want premature leaf defoliation. So then quickly moving to apples. What do we need to be thinking about for apples? Well, we're at the end of apple scab. So we've made it through apple scab. Probably the last few spores are spitting out right now as we speak with the rain, but as far as the infection potential, the spores should have really dropped off as far as the number that are available, that are available and mature from those overwintering leaves. Rust is in the same boat. I was checking on the rust galls yesterday on my cedar trees at the end of the farm, and it looked like for the most part the rust galls are drying up or have dried up. I might go sneak out in the middle of the rainstorm today just to go see how they look in real time, possibly hydrated or not. That's will get tell me the real indication. If anything, we're at the end of the rust, managing for rust. And these last 2 weeks have been very good for rust spore dispersal. Powdery mildew, not we're not in powdery mildew weather, but powdery mildew is out there with a vengeance because of how dry it was up until May 2nd. Because May 2nd is pretty much when it started raining, and we've had a maybe like 2 or 3 days since May 2nd where it's been maybe dry the whole day. So but powdery mildew is out there, and it's definitely out there with a vengeance. If you're struggling with powdery mildew, my recommendation is using a high rate of sulfur. You can do 8 to 10 pounds to hopefully help shut that down so you don't get secondary spread or minimize secondary spread. But we had great weather, great weather for powdery mildew this year. As far as fire blight goes, people should be scouting. You should, if your control was inadequate or you missed something, you probably are seeing something now, especially with how warm and wet it's been. So please start scouting. If you see it, cut it out. And cut it out during dry conditions. Don't cut it out when it's raining or when it's moist or when it's wet because that's a good way of spreading the disease around or spreading the bacteria around. If you do have it, I do recommend getting on that prohexadione calcium apogee or kudos to help harden off the shoots, to do your best to limit future shoot blight or shoot blight that may be in progress. Because when the shoots are hardened off, the bacteria can't move and cause disease. So that is important to be considering right now. Marsanina blotch or apple blotch, we're right in the middle of it as far as the infection potential. Today and tomorrow, probably good infection days. It likes the warmer weather. Marsanina blotch, it favors temperatures from 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and we definitely are in the middle of that. And it doesn't need very many wetness hours. So I have a feeling this is going to be a good apple blotch year. So just because scab is over, or scab is nearly over, don't pull your foot off the gas pedal. Apple blotch, you need to be vigilant about that through early June. And so the last two diseases I'll mention, sooty blotch fly speck, probably with the rain that we're getting this week and possibly next week, will meet the threshold of the hours, the wetness hours that trigger when control should start. Sooty blotch fly speck is a fairly straightforward disease to control. Captan controls it. You can tank mix it with Topsin during really rainy conditions because Captan can be easily washed off. So probably coming up, this is going to be important. So just to be mindful and don't forget about this disease. And the last thing I'll mention, and I mentioned it last week, is bitter rot. So I'm keeping a really close eye on the temperatures in conjunction with the rainfall we're getting because the bitter rot spores, based on our research, the spores are around all the time. It is what triggers the infection or the optimal conditions, environmental conditions. So that's warm weather and a prolonged wetness period. And so right now we're on the cooler side, but if the temperatures get up into the upper 70s and 80s, that's going to be really great. And combined with rainfall, that's going to be great weather for apple blotch. I was looking at the weather conditions this time last year, and it was a little hotter than what we're experiencing now. It was in the mid 80s for several days. And we did have, I think, some rain showers, which I think that probably triggered an infection event last year, early in May, late May. So this year, think about bitter rot control sooner rather than later, and especially during these rainy periods that we're experiencing. Captan is strong. You can use a Provia Omega. I recommend, or fluazinam. There is a generic version of fluazinam out there. Those have about a 28-day, 30-day PHI, so that's why I recommend using those products now. But always have Captan in that tank. 3 pounds to the acre because that's still your best, strongest product, but it can be washed off. So that's why you want a tank mix with something else. So that is the litany of diseases that are on my mind and should be on everyone else's mind during this late, or no, we're in mid-May. I'm jumping ahead. We're in mid-May right now. So a lot of action out there. Any
Sure
any
is.
any questions? Try to do
No,
that quickly. So
no, that was great. And I think it was really comprehensive and it covered quite a few things that I've talked to people about. So, and last but not least, Greg.
Hey, well, I will try not to add too much to the litany that Kari already listed. With insects, I would say we are going through the very, so far, normal year. I mean, we done with the petal fall sprays when we try to control oriental fruit moth and plum curculio, maybe some aphids, maybe some scale somewhere. Now we're moving to a different pest or group of pests, which really will keep us awake for the rest of the season. I mean, the one I'm talking about is codling moth. Um, Codling moth recently, let's say, let's just last 10 years, become such a big problem for us that I can't, I have a very hard time to imagine any orchard that does not need to control codling moth. However, there are different options that can be used to reduce the risk of having issues with codling moth. The most obvious one is to have mating disruption in the orchard. The benefit of mating disruption is you put it in and then it basically works for you 24/7 for the rest of the season. This cannot be said about any insecticides, which basically have to be reapplied, the models have to be checked, the monitoring has to be conducted, and so on. So, assuming that if you have mating disruption for codling moth, you also can have mating disruption for oriental fruit moth in the orchard, then the only thing you have to worry right now would be remaining of plum curculio. But if you don't have mating disruption in your orchard, well, then this is the time when you really start to pay a very close attention. Uh, they are very effective insecticides to help control codling moth. We have the whole group of diamide insecticides, which is Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim, and despite that they have a different active ingredients, the mode of action is exactly the same, and they are seems to be very, very effective. In addition to those three, to Altacor, to Exirel, and Verdeprim, we also have two of them in the mixtures. We have a product called Volium Flexi, which is a mix of Altacor and Actara. We have a product called Besiege, which is a mix of Altacor and Warrior. And then we have another mixture called Mimecto, which is a mix of Exirel and Agrimec. One thing about those 6 products is if we lose one of them, that for one reason or other it will stop work, all remaining 5 also will not work as expected in the orchard. In the last few years, we have seen cases where codling moth in some orchard develop resistance to one of the diamides and kind of eliminate the practical use of diamides as an effective tool to control codling moth. Another very effective product is delegate. Delegate belongs to different group with the different mode of action. And the good part about delegate is it does not have any brothers or sisters within the same mode of action. Delegate stands by itself, and so far, and we did all the testing. When we did any diamide testing, we also test all the products for resistance, all the population for resistance to delegate, and we did not detect any signs of resistance to delegate yet in any of the orchards. If you want to go with the softer products, something that is good for organic, but also for commercial. If you know that your pressure is not very high and you just want to protect everything else in the orchard, the codling moth granulosis virus, CPGV, in the products like Virosoft, Madex, or Sidex are also very effective against codling moth larvae. The challenge with this group is doesn't matter what rate you use in your tank that eventually end up on the foliage or fruit, the codling moth granulosis virus is basically disassembled by UV light in a relatively short time period. You can't expect codling moth granulosis virus to work more than for 7 days. This is in contrast to delegate or any diamide product, which actually provides you with 10, 14, and in some case even longer residual activity. I don't want to talk about this longer residual because again, we mentioned this earlier on, the fruit are growing right now and the foliage is growing, so you can't really count for more than 10, 14 days. However, you can count that the residue is there when with granulosis virus, the residue simply will not be there. One thing to remember, whatever option you decide to go with controlling codling moth, please do not mix products with a different mode of action. In this case, diamides, delegate, or this granulosis virus. Do not mix them for the same generation. And do not use the same group of product for 2 consecutive generations. So if you use, let's say, diamides late last season, so this year, your first generation should be controlled by something from a different group. And if you use, let's say, diamide this spring, if you're planning to use diamide this spring, don't plan to use diamides later on. You have to use products from different group. Those are very good products, but if we don't take care of them, the resistance will develop, as we have examples in some of orchards here in Pennsylvania. And then we might be losing very effective products. So just be careful about it. Another complicating factor for codling moth is, from probably the previous conversations we had, I refer a lot to using NUA as your tool to be as good, to have as good timing for the application as possible. The timing, especially for the codling moth, but also for oriental fruit moth, is extremely important because none of the products I listed actually will control adults. All of those are targeting larvae. And the problem with the larvae is that the larva actually is potentially exposed to any of those insecticides only for the first 24 hours after hatching from the egg. After larva enters the fruit, none of the insecticides can actually control it. So the product has to be there when the eggs are hatching. Well, that's why we use those models that tells us, the model tells us, well, we are at 5%, 10%, 50% egg hatch. This morning I again look at the NUA, and I already mentioned this, but this is something that we really have to be aware. When I use the Biglerville data, and we have a trap data for Biglerville, I know when the biofix for codling moth happened. It was April 28th. And even this one was already delayed because we have some individual flying earlier, but it was not a consistent flight, so I didn't count them. So, but we know that from April 28th, we have a continuous flight of codling moth. When I go to NUA and just click on Biglerville, the NUA is telling me that my biofix was on May 4th. There's more than a week difference. And this more than a week is basically my cause that you will be spraying 1 week too late, or maybe even more than 1 week too late. When I go to other locations that I'm also getting trap data from growers who cooperate with me, I know that their flight started on May 2nd, May 1st. When I go to the new allocation for their places, I'm being told that codling moth did not start until May 11 or 12. So as good as NUA is, and it is a good program, great tool, if you don't feed the correct data to the model, it can cause problems and mislead our actions trying to control insects. So if you have traps and you're using NUA, make sure that for any insect you're looking at, enter the correct biofix date, because this might be a big difference. And in our case, we have more than 100 degree days in one location. We have more than 140 degree days difference. Those are the differences in the degree day accumulation. And understanding that you have to be precise with the timing, because the larva is exposed to insecticide for less than 24 hours. Because larva has to hatch from the egg and then it will go inside the fruit. And none of those insecticides work inside the fruit. So this is something to remember. Situation is slightly different from plum curculio. We talked about plum curculio at petal fall. We talked about it last week, and I'm talking about it again because plum curculio is still active. And plum curculio will still be active at least for a week or two. Again, if you did not have a problem with plum curculio before, you're probably good if you did the petal fall spray and the pressure will be probably minimal, not justifying spraying additional insecticides. If you know you have curculio problem and you experienced it in the past, be aware that curculio need to be controlled for at least a week or two. And diamides rather do not work against curculio. Delegates does not work against curculio. And granulosis virus also does not work against plum curculio. So if you think you need to add something, then your only good option in this case will be spraying either Besiege, which is a diamide plus, it actually Altacore plus Warrior, or Volium Flexi, which is Altacore plus Actara. And both Actara and Warrior will provide you at least some control. The last thing I want to mention when we are on those mixtures is product like Volume Flexi has Actara. Product as Endigo has Actara. And Actara has Actara. I mean, we're talking about active ingredient thiamethoxam, but basically, this product, the active ingredient thiamethoxam, has a seasonal limit for the season, how much can be used. And this is not for in each product, but it is for the seasonal combined use of thiamethoxam per season. So if you already use Actara because you were trying to control, let's say, plum curculio or rose apple aphids or maybe green peach aphids, and you go with Volium right now, you already at the seasonal limit. And you cannot use indigo later on for controlling, let's say, stingbug. You have to be aware of this. The numbers are listed on each label because Actara still is only produced by Syngenta. So they are very clear about how many application and what is the seasonal limit for using of the thiamethoxam. But be careful about the seasonal limits when you go with any of the mixtures, because if the product is in the mixture, it is counted the same as it would be used by itself against the seasonal limits. So that's really the most important pieces right now. Uh, just to mention this, I have seen more green peach aphid this year in our peach blocks in Biglerville than I have seen in, I don't know, probably in the last 10 years. I don't really know why is this happening. But again, if you go with a sale, and on peaches you still have to control plum curculio. If you go with a sale, it probably should take care of your green peach aphids. If not, you can use any version of imidacloprid. It used to be called Provado. Now there is a lot of generic products. If you go with Actara, it also will control green peach aphids. Other than this, another thing, and I think I mentioned this last time, some of you might be should expect that periodical cicada might show up in your area probably later this month. As soon as the ground, as the soil reach over 60 degrees, that's when the cicada will start showing up. And with the rain we're getting right now, this will be very easy for cicada to get out from the ground and actually go to the trees. So I would think that in the next 2 weeks, probably in some areas, and again, the brood 14 of periodical cicada is the second largest that we are experiencing in Pennsylvania. Basically, entire central Pennsylvania, but also Adams, Berks, York counties. They are also Bedford, also. They are exposed to this brood. Again, cicada is not a widespread pest. In some orchard, you might not see it. In some orchard, it will be in numbers such low that it doesn't matter. But when you start hearing them and you start worry about them, spray within 10 days after you start hearing them, especially on younger trees, and they should be protected. Again, unfortunately, you will have to use broad spectrum insecticides. Pyrethroids work great. And if you do this, then don't be surprised that later on, we're talking late June, July, August, European red mites might become a problem on any crops are using. Pyrethroids will kill all the beneficials. So saying this, I don't want to make it too long. So that's the update for this week from me. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. That was really comprehensive. This week has had so many things, but I think that's how it's going to be for the next couple weeks for everybody. Um, Carrie, do you want to go over the last couple Twilights that you guys
Oh,
got?
yeah, that's right. So Yeah, the Twilights and then another push for the field day. So this week we have a Twilight meeting tomorrow in Western PA in Bulger, Pennsylvania at Rivendell Farms. That will start at 6 p.m. And then on Thursday morning we have our Twilight meeting in the morning. It's a morning meeting in Erie at Birch Farms Market. So that's at 10 a.m. And so, because it's a 6 hour drive for Greg and I to get back to Biglerville. So they are kind enough to meet in the morning so we can get on the road early. Then the last is, last but not least, the website is active to be able to register for the June 25th Grower Field Day at Freck. We've got a lot of great things planned, some early morning demonstrations, lunch, and then afternoon concurrent educational sessions. So I encourage you to check out the website. I think Don will put links in the description for this podcast. I think he's doing that for every time we do it, just so people are aware. We have had a few sign-ups so far, so we're about like 6 weeks away from field day, so hopefully it won't be the hottest day of June. I hope by saying that over and over, I will manifest it. And yeah, so I think it'll be a good day.
Sounds good. And yeah, I'll have those links in the episode description. So, we are really running up against time. So I will have everyone say goodbye and I'll get this edited and get this into people's hands.
All right, goodbye and good luck. May the
All right.
force be with you.
Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.